Since the early 1980s, there has been made over 100 different Star Wars video games, which has been released across various platforms. These games span multiple genres, including action, adventure, role-playing and strategy games. Most people probably remembers Star Wars Battlefront 2, Star Wars The Old Republic and LEGO Star Wars The Complete Saga, to mention a few. These are games that have imprinted themselves onto a generation of gamers and Star Wars fans. Among all these games, however, there is one that stands out. 16 years ago, in the year 2009, Star Wars fans got treated to what might be one of the most interesting gaming experiences in the series' history. Star Wars The Clone Wars Republic Heroes is a Star Wars game based on the Clone Wars movie and TV series that aired from 2008 until 2020. Developed by Australian game developer Chrome Studios, best known for their work on Spyro the Dragon, and published by LucasArts, it was released on October 6, 2009, for multiple platforms, including PC, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, Wii, PlayStation 2, PlayStation Portable, and Nintendo DS. The game is set between Season 1 and Season 2 of the Clone Wars and includes characters such as Anakin Skywalker, Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka Tano, as well as several other main and side characters from the show. Now it's time to take a look back at this now 16-year-old game to see how it holds up, both story-wise and gameplay-wise. So if you're interested in revisiting the game, strap in because it's going to be an interesting ride. The story begins with Anakin, Rex and Ahsoka in the middle of a battle on Ryloth, where they are tasked with removing the remaining droids stationed there after the liberation that took place in Season 1 of the show. After fighting their way through the droids and defeating a Magna Tri-droid, they move on to the town of Reston, where the droid invasion first started. There they have to activate a holobridge to let their heavier AT-ATs and the larger clone force move into the area. After giving the Force access to the area, Sergeant Kano messages to the Jedi that him and his men have found a nest of clankers, whom have fortified their position. Kano and his men move through the town of Reston while clearing out any droids they encounter along the way. After clearing out what seems to be the town square, the clones overhear a message from the droids pointing them towards several sectors in the area. Requesting support from the Jedi, Anakin and Ahsoka acquire some separatist STAPs to traverse the harsh terrain easier to reach the clones. When they reach the clones, Kano and his troops are under attack from the droids. With the combined forces of clones and Jedi, they manage to repel the attack. After this, the story jumps to the Juma 9 station, where we encounter Obi-Wan, who have just came back from a meeting with Senator Amidala on Naboo. On the way to speak to the station commander, Obi-Wan encounters Plo Koon. While taking the elevator to the command center, it suddenly stops, and when they step out they see that there is a separatist frigate that has arrived just outside the station, sending boarding parties their way. After fighting their way through the station's hallways and traversing the inners of the station, the duo reaches the hangar. Here they hold off droids so that the clone pilots can get access to the planes in an effort to fight back the attacking forces in space. After successfully giving the clones access to the fighters, General Kenobi contacts Cody in an effort to divert all power to the station's shield generator. While Cody works on making his way to the shields, General Kenobi and Plo Koon sets their target on the reactor room that has been overtaken by droids. After clearing out the reactor core, Obi-Wan and Plo Koon tries to contact Anakin and Ahsoka on Ryloth, but their comm seems to be jammed. Back on Ryloth, Anakin, Ahsoka and the clone troopers are still working on clearing out the several outposts in the area. After making their way to another outpost and while Kano and his men are trying to activate the holobridge, they get strafed by a Volter droid flying by. When Anakin and Ahsoka are done destroying the outpost tower, they run to check on the clones. Luckily, most of the men are okay from the attack, but some still need medical attention. After escorting the clones back to the previous liberated outpost 2 and getting them safe on the gunship, Anakin asks if there has been any news on General Kenobi's whereabouts. He is told that the last contact they had with Kenobi was when he arrived at Juma 9 and that their comms have been static ever since, but they attribute this to the asteroid fields in the vicinity of the station. While this is happening, Rex and Boomer are patrolling on their AT-STs. After fighting off some droids, they see a person running off in a distance. While dismounting their vehicles and calling up General Skywalker to report what they have seen, they are attacked by an unknown assailant, making him lose contact with Skywalker. Luckily, Rex manages to give up their location before he was cut off, setting Anakin and Ahsoka off to try to help. While fighting off more droids on the way to save Captain Rex and Boomer, Anakin and Ahsoka feels that Obi-Wan and Plo Koon is in danger through their connection with the Force. But still they have to help Rex before they can think about helping Obi-Wan. On Juma 9, Obi-Wan and Plo Koon are navigating the station's inner industrial section. After avoiding both droids and environmental dangers, they finally reach the communication center of the station in an effort to re-establish comms with the Allied forces. Once they enter the control room, however, they find a Skakoan mercenary called Cole Teske communicating with Count Dooku. In this conversation, Count Dooku tells Teske to recover it, referring to something yet unknown. After a short conversation with the mercenary where he tells the Jedi that he's just passing through, implying that the attack on the station is not the main goal of the droids, the Jedi tries to arrest Teske. Teske however pulls out a detonator, implying that the base has been laced with explosives. Even though the Jedi stand down, the mercenary still activates the explosives and flies off, prompting a chase from the two Jedi. While they are chasing Teske, Obi-Wan hails Cody and orders him to begin the evacuation of the station. Clone technician Switch and Cody make their way to the escape pods with several other clones. Here, Switch uses his technical knowledge to slice open the locked escape pods, allowing several clones to escape. When they get to the last escape pod, Cody, Switch and several other clones board it, only to find that the pod is fried and won't launch. Switch exits the pod to use the manual override, saving Cody and the other clones, but leaving himself stuck on the station, apparently dying in the subsequent explosion. While the station is exploding around them, Kenobi and Plo Koon finally manages to corner Teske, where he once again holds a detonator, threatening to blow up the last remaining escape pods, leaving everyone left on the station to die. After managing to knock the detonator out of Teske's hands, a fight begins. At the end of the fight, Teske is cornered against a large window that Kenobi and Obi-Wan slowly cracks by throwing crates and explosives at it. After finally breaking the glass, Teske is sucked out into space, but still holding on to the station. Kenobi has to throw his lightsaber to destroy the detonator, which is headed for Teske's hands in the chaos. Plo Koon throws his lightsaber to hit the control panel, controlling the security door that seals off the broken window. After closing the door, the Jedi realizes that Teske still survived, with him using his jetpack and cybernetic implants to fly away from the station, leaving the two Jedi stranded and trapped without their lightsabers. While this is happening, Senator Amidala decides to go investigate separatist activity on her own since Obi-Wan missed her planned rendezvous. Anakin and Ahsoka continues their search for Rex, while Jedi Generals Luminara Unduli and Aayla Secura investigate reports from Jabba the Hutt of separatist activity on the frozen world of Alsoc 3. After clearing the way for the ATTEs, Aayla Secura, Luminara Unduli, Commander Bly and Commander Gree comes across a large anomalous crater with a destroyed separatist frigate. When they finally make their way through the rubble of the crater and arrives at the destroyed frigate, while they are entering the destroyed parts, we can see that they are being watched from a distance by Ventress. Ventress is talking to Count Dooku, who tells her to eliminate the Jedi to make sure that the secret behind the destroyed ship isn't revealed to the Republic. At the same time, General Mace Windu and General Kit Fisto arrives at the Juma 9 station in search of General Kenobi and Plo Koon. Before they can do a proper search, however, they have to restore more of the station's core functions. To do this, they first have to head to the central computer, but when they get there, they realize that the power of the station is out. The next objective then becomes to re-energize the main reactor. This means that they also need to do external repairs to the station's systems. This task falls on Commander Cody and Pons. With a small clone force, the commanders manage to repair all of the capacitors to the main reactor, allowing Mace Windu and Kit Fisto to reactivate the reactor from within. While doing this, they also discover that Switch survived the explosion and is still on the station. Back on Alsoc 3, the Jedi and the clones have started exploring the downed ship. They try to find the ship's data recorder in order to figure out how the ship got destroyed. After battling through the droids sent by Ventress, they arrive at the data recorder. On the recorder, they witness an unknown ship docking onto the frigate just before the detonation. They theorize that the unknown ship might belong to a smuggler or a bounty hunter. They also discover that the ship was transporting two highly classified weapons. This points to the fact that one of those weapons might be behind the explosion of the ship. At this time, it's also discovered that Ventress has rigged the ship to explode, sending the Jedi and the clones running away to safety. After they escape the explosion, Ventress reveals herself for the Jedi, prompting a fight between the two parties. The Jedi luckily manage to defeat the assassin by collapsing a cave onto her. On Ryloth, we find Rex and Boomer taken captive by the bounty hunter Cad Bane, who seems to be standing on the same weapon seen on the data recorder on Alsoc 3. Under threat of explosive binders, Rex and Boomer help the bounty hunter fight off an attack by droid forces. While this is happening, Anakin and Ahsoka are closing in on Rex's position. Finally, they arrive at the hangar where Rex, Boomer and Bane are fighting, and immediately starts to help them. After fighting off the droids, the Jedi free Rex and Boomer and capture Cad Bane as well as the weapon. Under more attack from the droids outside the hangar, they decide to head to Cad Bane's ship in an effort to escape the approaching droids. Rex and Boomer takes it on themselves to head out to take on the main droid force to pull attention away from the Jedi and Bane. On Juma 9, Kit Fisto and Mace Windu with the help of Switch navigated through the heavily damaged station. Switch manages to locate the position of General Kenobi and Plo Koon, prompting Mace Windu to send Cody and Pawns in that direction. Cody and Pawns ends up finding the generals, but they are blocked by a ray shield that they can't take down. Mace Windu, Kit Fisto and Switch make their way to the communication center to try to reactivate the comms. There they have to defend Switch from several droids while he works on the control panel. After regaining control of the center, Switch discovers that the reason behind the droid attack was because they wanted to use the station's sensor to locate an unusual energy frequency, probably relating to the weapon now in Anakin's hands. Obi-Wan and Plo Koon make their way to the control center as well to help Mace Windu and Kit Fisto destroy the remaining droids in the area. After escorting Cad Bane to his ship, the group are ambushed by Tesca, whom it seems Cad Bane stole the weapon from. After battling over the crate holding the weapon, Anakin and Ahsoka are trapped in the ray shield, while Captain Rex and Boomer continues to fight Tesca. At the end of the fight, Rex has to choose between trying to stop Tesca from taking the weapon, or to save Anakin and Ahsoka since the ray shield is shrinking. When the dust settles, it seems that both Tesca and Bane has disappeared in chaos, leaving the group behind. After re-establishing comms on the station, our group finally gets in contact with the group on Ryloth and Alsoc 3. Switch manages to access some data left in the station's mainframe, as well as a distress signal from Senator Amidala. The data on the mainframe shows Tesca talking to Dooku, showing that the weapon is designed to destroy the sun within the Naboo system, rendering the whole system inhabitable. The distress message from Amidala tells about a secret weapons facility on Bepor, a planet near Naboo's sun, as well as her being captured by Tesca. This prompting all the groups to team up and head to Bepor to destroy the facility. On Bepor, Anakin and Obi-Wan are tasked with infiltrating the facility to disable the shield generator, while Rex and Cody creates a diversion. Mace Windu and Ahsoka are tasked with guiding the main force towards the facility. Anakin and Obi-Wan manages to get to the shield generator and disable it, but they forgot to disable the alarms, making the whole base go into an alert state. Ahsoka and Mace Windu fight their way through the base until they link up with Obi-Wan and Anakin. Here they discover through the Force that Count Dooku also is in the facility. The Jedi then split up, with Mace Windu and Obi-Wan heading to fight Count Dooku and Anakin and Ahsoka heading to destroy the weapon. While the Jedi regroup, Rex, Cody and Pons are on their way to set up an evacuation zone, in case they need a quick exit. After arriving at the landing pad and destroying the droids, the clones call in R2-D2 to fly into Twilight to get it ready for departure. But before they can set up properly, Dooku arrives and sends the Twilight plummeting down into the acid below the platform. Obi-Wan and Mace Windu appears, and they try to talk Dooku into surrendering, but instead he activates Magna Guards to surround the Jedi. This prompting a fight between the Jedi, the droids and Dooku himself. The Jedi manages to defeat Dooku by deflecting his own lightning onto several mechanisms holding the platform above the ground. While the Jedi jump aboard the Twilight, Dooku falls to his presumed death. The destruction of the base makes the group leave the vicinity, since debris is threatening to damage the Twilight. After they leave, however, a ship rises from the fog, revealing Dooku standing on top of it. In the heart of the base, Anakin and Ahsoka manage to locate both the weapon and Tesca, who are holding Padme hostage. While Anakin tries to distract Tesca, Ahsoka is trying to free Padme from her restraints. Unfortunately, Tesca realizes what's happening and starts shooting at Ahsoka and Padme. Ahsoka jumps in to fight Tesca while Anakin manages to free Padme. After freeing Padme, Anakin sends her to destroy the weapon while he and Ahsoka stops Tesca. This leads to a prolonged fight between the parties, which comes to stop when Cad Bane suddenly appears and damages Tesca's rocket boosters, stranding him on the platform. After a final fight in the polarization beam's core room, Tesca is defeated when he is pushed into the polarization beam. Padme in the meanwhile managed to overload the gravity beam, basically putting the whole base in self-destruct mode. Anakin, Ahsoka and Padme managed to escape the facility by stealing some SDAPs from 2 droids, flying their way out of the facility and onto the Twilight, which is waiting for them outside. With the base destroyed and Tesca dead, the crew flies off towards new adventures. And that's the end of the story. From a narrative standpoint, the structure and pacing of the story hold up fairly well under scrutiny. The plot is divided into 3 main storylines: Ryloth, Yuma 9 and Alsoc 3, which eventually converge in the game's final act on Bepor. The story follows a classic 3-act structure, with each act beginning with an opening sequence similar to those seen in the Clone Wars, complete with narration and exposition to set the stage. Act 1 introduces the primary conflict on Ryloth, the attack on Juma 9 Station and the main antagonist Cal Teska. This act also establishes key characters such as Anakin, Ahsoka, Obi-Wan, Rex and others, while easing the player into the gameplay and gradually building up the mystery. By the end of Act 1 several key questions arise. Why did Separatists attack Juma 9? Who ambushed Rex and Boomer, and who is Cal Teska and what are his intentions? Act 2 begins with another Clone Wars style opening, using reused clips from the show along with narration to explain the situation with Senator Amidala, and how the Republic obtained information about Alsoc 3. The act leads directly into the unfolding mystery on Alsoc 3, where the discovery of a devastating weapon rises the stakes. At this point the story gains momentum as players begin to piece together how past events connect. This act serves to heighten attention by having the hero suffer a major loss. Teska escapes with the weapon while also providing enough clues about his ultimate plan to propel the story forward. While the overarching narrative is functional, several plot holes and unanswered questions weaken its cohesion. Some notable inconsistencies include: why did Cad Bane steal the weapon in the first place? Why didn't Ventress destroy the data recorder to prevent the Jedi from obtaining crucial information? Why would Bane kidnap Rex and Boomer, an act guaranteed to attract the Jedi attention? How does Switch survive the explosion? And how does the Twilight survive its fall into acid? These lingering questions make the story feel incomplete in some areas. Another issue is the overwhelming number of characters. The PC version of the game features 18 playable characters, with a total of 24 when including NPCs. While this variety makes sense from a gameplay perspective, offering customization and diversity, it negatively impacts the narrative. Several new characters such as Kano, Boomer, Switch and Cal Teska receive little to no character development. While this may be acceptable for the clones, it's a major drawback for Teska, the primary antagonist. The game never provides any real explanation for his motivations or why he built the super weapon, making him a forgettable one-dimensional villain whose only purpose is to be defeated. Beyond its plot inconsistencies, the biggest weakness of the story is its lack of emotional and thematic depth. While it delivers plenty of action, banter and fun moments, it fails to leave a lasting impression once the player puts down the controller. However, the game's presentation excels in many areas. The art style, voice acting and sound design are outstanding. The developers successfully captured the visual essence of the Clone Wars using the same voice actors and authentic soundscape, including blaster effects, lightsaber hums and environmental ambience. This attention to detail makes the game feel like a true episode of the series, which was likely the developer's goal. Ultimately, while the story itself is passable on paper, its execution in both presentation and gameplay leaves room for improvement. The gameplay follows a linear structure with levels inspired by the Clone Wars TV show. Each mission consists of a mix of combat, light puzzle solving and platforming. While the game successfully captures the look and feel of the series, its mechanics often lack depth and polish, making the overall experience feel repetitive and at times frustrating. Combat is split between two distinct playstyles, Jedi and Clone Troopers. Jedi gameplay emphasizes lightsaber combat, force abilities and acrobatics. Players can perform moves such as droid jacking, which allows them to temporarily take control of enemy droids. However, despite the variety of abilities, combat is largely reduced to mashing the X button to hack and slash through enemies. While combo moves exist, they feel unnecessary due to the simplistic enemy AI and the game's low difficulty. Most encounters can be won using only 3 primary actions: spamming X to swing the lightsaber, using Y to force push, which eliminates most enemies in 1 or 2 hits with almost no cooldown, and droid jacking to deal with tougher foes. Since once you have jumped on a droid, the only thing you have to do is press Y to slam down on it and destroy it. As a result, combat quickly becomes repetitive with little incentive to experiment with different techniques. Clone Trooper gameplay focuses on blasters, grenades and heavy weaponry. Players can either aim freely with the right thumbstick or crouch with the left trigger for better accuracy. However, similar to Jedi combat, the mechanics lack depth. Most battles can be won simply by using the right stick to shoot, while grenades and heavy weapons are so overpowered and abundant that they remove any real challenge. Since ammo is rarely a concern, encounters often feel more like brief shooting galleries than engaging fights. Boss battles are present throughout the game, but they too suffer from the same lack of complexity. Most fights boil down to chipping away at an enemy's health bar while occasionally deflecting attacks with force abilities. Rather than feeling like climactic moments, boss fights often become tedious exercises in endurance. Beyond combat, platforming plays a major role in navigating levels, though it often proves to be the most frustrating aspect of the game. Surprisingly, platforming sequences cause more player deaths than enemy encounters, not because of well-designed difficulty but due to clunky movement and an unreliable semi-static camera. Depth perception is often an issue, leading to frequent miscalculated jumps. Additionally, certain sections require destroying parts of the environment with flying droids to progress. While this mechanic isn't inherently bad, the game automatically ejects the player from the droid after performing the action, often sending them straight off the edge of the map. This results in a frustrating cycle of unnecessary deaths and trial and error gameplay. It's likely that the developers were aware of these issues as the respawn system appears to compensate for them. Checkpoints are frequent and usually placed directly in combat zones, meaning players rarely have to redo difficult platforming sections or long stretches of combat. This suggests that the respawn system was implemented as a workaround for the game's unpolished mechanics rather than as a natural quality of life feature. Despite its gameplay flaws, the game excels in presentation. The sound design is outstanding, with lightsaber swings, blaster fire and explosions lifted directly from the Clone Wars series.
Archers, take cover!
While lightsaber combat lacks depth in gameplay, it makes up for it when slashing through battle droids. The way droids are severed and collapse into pieces is executed so well that this likely contributed to the game's tier rating. The game also features collectible upgrades, cheats and cosmetic modifications. However, character upgrades feels largely unnecessary as the game never provides enough difficulty to warrant them. On the other hand, cheats and cosmetic options add an element of fun, allowing players to inject humor into the experience, such as making droids dance. Ultimately, while the game succeeds in capturing the aesthetic and atmosphere of the Clone Wars, its gameplay suffers from shallow mechanics, frustrating platforming, and repetitive combat. The strongest aspect of the experience is its presentation, but this alone isn't enough to elevate the gameplay beyond a basic, often uninspired action platformer. I remember getting this game when I was 9 or 10 years old on a PlayStation 3. And I was so excited to play it that I got my mom to drive to my friend's house so that I could show him the game and invite him over to play it, since we both were big Clone Wars fans. The problem with Republic Heroes aren't necessarily the story, the gameplay, or any other singular part of the experience. These elements aren't bad, but they are also far from good. There is a mountain of changes that could have been made to improve the game, but for me the main disappointment isn't any of these points. I can still remember this from when I picked up the game at 9 years old. My biggest disappointment with the game was that it wasn't a Clone Wars skinned Battlefront 2. The cover art on the CD case, the promise of being able to play as clones, Jedi and otherwise your favorite characters from the show, as well as the tier rating, really set high hopes for those that picked up the game. I don't believe I was the only one that got this feeling. This is a big hypothesis from my side, but the fact that the game came out 4 years after Battlefront 2, at a time where the fans was starting to itch for a new Battlefront game, especially since the cancellation of Battlefront 3 happened in 2008, at a time when YouTube was much smaller and you were left with a box art for guidance of what the game would entail, it's easy to speculate how people would pick up Republic Heroes in the hopes that it resembled Battlefront. This might have led to some of the disappointment that can be found around the game. That's not to say that the game has been misrepresented by those who play it and reviewed it. The game definitely lacks quality control and fine-tuning that otherwise could have made it into an excellent action-adventure game. And in some sense that is what the game really is when you look at it. A semi-serious action-adventure game set in the Clone Wars universe. Focusing more on action, fun moments and callbacks to the show more so than an independent story with great character development and gameplay. In conclusion, Republic Heroes is at best a barely serviceable Star Wars game, and it is unfortunately one of a few games that delves into the Clone Wars both in art style and content. It was both interesting and sad to go through old interviews and hearing developers talk about the game. The fact that they worked with the same team that produced the Clone Wars and got access to actors, assets, and the sound library only points to how great the game could have been. In these interviews, the developers also states that the goal with the game was to make it accessible for everyone, specifically mentioning parents and children. This, in my mind, casts a light on why the game feels so bland as it does, since it seems that Chrome Studios focused on making the game more designed towards small children and not older audiences. This might be because at the time when the game was produced and released, the Clone Wars series was still regarded as mainly a children's show, and the show had not progressed to the more adult subject matter it's known for today. All of this boiling down to an objectively lackluster and bland experience. This is a real shame, since the Clone Wars era in Star Wars is probably one of the most untapped potential when it comes to gaming. There is also few games that use the style that the Clone Wars series provides, making the loss feel more substantial. Republic Heroes isn't the greatest game ever made, but it's also not the worst. The game has really big problems, but it also has some fun elements to it. But even on the background of all these problems, the game still holds a lot of nostalgic value for a lot of people, myself included. I do not regret going back and playing the game, even though it only got me to remember how bland it is. But I still enjoy parts of the game. The game is not great, but it's also not terribly bad. Boils down to somewhat a bland experience for whomever plays it, but the game still holds nostalgic value for a lot of people, and whatever anyone chooses to say about it, it's still a part of the Star Wars legacy, for better or for worse. What do you think about Star Wars Republic Heroes? Did you play it when you were younger, and do you agree or disagree with the points brought up in this video? Comment down below and share your story and opinion about the game. If you liked the video, I would highly appreciate if you leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thanks for watching, and I hope I see you in the next one. Goodbye.